China's rise is no longer a distant geopolitical storyline. It is becoming a force that is pressing directly onto the lives of individuals, nations, and societies. We're entering a world increasingly shaped, and in many areas controlled, by China's power. In such a world, contact, friction, and even criticism toward China will not only be unavoidable, but in some cases necessary. When a country controls vast stretches of global supply chains, manufacturing capacity, and key technologies, its influence stops being abstract. It becomes personal, economic, and structural. Within this emerging reality, criticism of China faces two sharply different outcomes. One possibility is that criticism becomes irrelevant. As your country's influence declines, your voice loses weight. Criticizing China becomes like a small insect confronting an elephant. The elephant doesn't need to respond. It only needs to ignore you, and your voice disappears. You are no longer seen as a stakeholder, but as someone who doesn't matter. The other possibility is that criticism invites pressure or retaliation, not through war, but through economic leverage. China doesn't need to send troops. It only needs to tighten access to key components, restrict market entry, or disrupt supply chains. Entire sectors, companies, or livelihoods can be affected without a single shot fired. A world controlled by China doesn't mean political occupation. It means dependency. It means that daily life, food, clothing, housing, electronics, becomes inseparable from Chinese manufacturing. Even when products aren't labeled made in China, their upstream components or technologies may still rely on China. China doesn't need to redraw borders. Controlling production is enough to shape outcomes. When China was weak, criticism was merely a moral stance. But as China grows stronger and more intertwined with global systems, refusing to criticize or refusing to discuss impact can become damaging to your own interests. Silence stops being neutral. From a moral perspective, criticism often stems from basic common sense about right and wrong. When a policy intrudes directly into personal choice, people feel compelled to speak. China's one-child policy is a stark example. Limiting most families to one child meant that a single accident or tragedy could erase a family's future entirely. What should have been a personal decision became a state mandate. Beyond its human impact, enforcement involved fines, pressure, and controversial procedures. Real experiences, not rumors. During the pandemic, extreme lockdowns, sealed buildings, disrupted medical access, food shortages in some areas, and sudden mass reopening created a shock to ordinary lives. If questioning such policies becomes unwelcome or impermissible, then public discussion itself begins to erode. A society that cannot question power is not managing itself, it is silencing itself. As China's influence expands, its governance style begins to radiate outward. More governments may come to prefer less criticism, less transparency, and less public participation. The space for speaking shrinks. The space for staying silent grows. This trend is not theoretical. It is already underway. Even if morality is set aside entirely, the economic dimension makes criticism and proactive discussions unavoidable. For the past 30 years, the living standards of ordinary people in the West have not meaningfully improved. It's true that Chinese manufacturing has lowered the cost of goods like appliances. But services and housing, things you can't import, have skyrocketed in price. The previous generation could often sustain a dignified life on a single income. Today, even two incomes may struggle to achieve the same level. Did China take jobs or extract wealth from developed economies? It is at least a significant factor. The decline of America's Rust Belt is not an academic point. It is a physical landscape of shuttered factories and lost livelihoods. Blaming everything on the West or everything on China are both extreme simplifications. But what is undeniable is that pressure on ordinary people is real and rising, and societies cannot ignore it indefinitely. If the United States withdraws or turns inward, other countries will be forced to protect their middle class and working populations on their own. In that context, examining and questioning China's impact becomes less of a choice and more of a necessity. Looking further ahead, the deepest risk in the long run may not be economic, but institutional. If China's model eventually proves more efficient in technology and economic output, Western democracies may begin to lose their confidence and their appeal. The right to openly criticize power, the right to free expression, and the right to participate in politics could increasingly be viewed as inefficient or optional. Democracy could gradually become something mocked rather than valued. If criticizing China becomes strategically unwise or even discouraged, then citizens may find themselves in a position that begins to resemble that of people who cannot openly question their own government. China's model does have strengths. Its long-term planning is formidable. Its execution is fast and decisive. Its infrastructure is modern and extensive. Public order is strong. Living costs in many areas are low, and emergency mobilization can be highly efficient. These strengths are real, and they explain China's rapid expansion and global competitiveness. But the same system carries fundamental weaknesses: limited political participation, widespread censorship and self-censorship, opaque decision-making upon public policies, and personal property rights that can yield to political priorities. Perhaps most importantly, extreme policies can impact anyone at least once in their whole lifespan. History shows this clearly, from population control to mass campaigns to pandemic lockdowns. When personal destiny can be reshaped by abrupt top-down decisions, the cost is borne by individuals, not the system. China's rise, therefore, is not a hypothetical future. It is a present reality. It is reshaping global supply chains and power structures, and may eventually reshape how people live, speak, and think. The real question is no longer what might China do someday, but what must we do now? How should societies respond? How should they compete? What must they protect? Those questions belong to the next chapter, and they cannot wait forever.